Well, good morning, folks. If we're all awake, we want to welcome everybody. And if you're wondering, gosh, things look different. Obviously, Bible school is only 2 days away, and you can see the theme is stellar. And if you're wondering, gosh, there's an awful lot of silver around here. We're going to have this place rocking and rolling with a whole bunch of kids starting Monday morning. So enjoy the decorations, and it looks a little different than normal. We are so glad y'all have made it here on a Saturday morning, and we have three guests with us today to share a word from our annual conference. Our Bishop, Jimmy Nunn, is here, as well as our District Superintendent, Connie Gibson, and Tish Malloy, who is at the conference office in charge of transitional ministries. And they're all going to share a word with us and then answer our questions. And you need to have those on a written question on a form that they have provided. And I think, Jenny, do you have those? Are you the one who has the questions? Yeah. If you didn't already get one and you need a pen, there are pens that, as you came in this south door. But if you need a pen, you can get one back there. If you need a piece of paper to write a question on, raise your hand, and Jenny will bring you that piece of paper. So it looks like most people have already gotten those. So again, welcome. Glad you're here. Let's begin with a word of prayer. Lord, you are our help. You're our shield in every situation. In every time of trial and conflict, you're still the Lord. In this moment, in this time in the life of your church, we ask for wisdom, for patience, for grace. We ask that you would reveal yourself to us even in the midst of disagreements and challenges. We pray for the people called Methodist in every church, in every place. We ask your blessing upon our guests as they share with us this morning. And as always, we pray in the precious name of the risen Christ. Amen. I think she said. Our Ed Council Secretary, are you here? There you are. You're back there. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Would you? This is a church conference, right, or a church conference?
Yeah, and I'll ask for.
So, would you be willing to serve as the secretary? Yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah, she did.
It's good to see some out here that I know from a previous life before I became pastor, so it's good to meet them today. As Larry said, this is a special called church conference of the Broken Arrow First United Methodist Church for the purpose of discussing the future of the United Methodist Church and Broken Arrow First United Methodist Church, and to have that discussion with Bishop James Nunn and other representatives from the Oklahoma Annual Conference. I'm being very specific because when we do have a church conference, it is called for a very specific purpose. And so that's what I'm stating, and I call the church conference to order. As Larry referenced, we do need to elect formally a secretary to record the minutes, and my apologies, remind me of your name, wherever you went. Where'd you go? There you are. Okay, Amy, thank you. So if you would approve Amy serving as the secretary for this church conference, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say I volunteer. Okay, all right. Okay. We do need a record of attendance today, so please, if you did not sign one of those forms as you came in, please be sure and do that on your way out. Again, the purpose of today's church conference is to provide information and discuss the future of the United Methodist Church. We will not be taking any kind of vote today. I thank you for the prayerful steps of discernment that I know you've already taken up to this point. And I appreciate you coming today with open hearts, open minds to perhaps receive some new information that you haven't considered up to this point. And again, I'm thankful to have our bishop, Bishop Jimmy Nunn, here with us, and Reverend Tish Malloy, our Director of Transitional Ministries. After a few comments from me, and then from Reverend Malloy, and then from Bishop Nunn, we'll enter into a time of answering questions. That's really why we're here. We want to answer the specific questions that you have today. And again, if you will, submit those on the cards, and please write as legibly as possible. We won't have an open mic for any kind of discussion, but we will respond to all the questions we receive within certain parameters, because I do need to highlight we've scheduled this to last for an hour and a half, and then we have other church conferences today that we will need to leave for at that point. So if by chance we don't get all the questions answered, then we'll be sure and take those and respond back on those. I have just a few kind of general comments. Again, discussions and any votes on disaffiliation are possible because of paragraph 2553 in the Book of Discipline, and it also follows the guidelines in our disaffiliation agreement that's been adopted by our Conference Board of Trustees. A vote on disaffiliation from the United Methodist Church is based upon one or more of three very specific reasons of conscience, all of those related to human sexuality. Those reasons are described in our disaffiliation agreement, and they are the only basis for your vote if you do indeed decide to vote for disaffiliation. I do want to respond to just a little bit of information that I know has been shared by different groups, or maybe out there that you've heard in some discussions. It's been stated that apportionment payments for a church who remains United Methodist will increase significantly because of the dramatic decrease in some of the large church that are involved, and that's not really accurate. The apportionments for 2023, so our overall budget and the conference apportionments for 2023 were cut dollar for dollar for the 29 churches that disaffiliated in October. So there's not any kind of adjustment or increase for remaining churches as a result of that. And we have groups that are looking at ways that we can continue to reduce the budget going into the future. So it's not just a matter of all these churches have left, the ones that have, and so we're going to have to pick up all of that responsibility if we remain United Methodist. That's just not accurate. I do also want to remind you that the Book of Discipline states that no church property can be sold or mortgaged. So your building, your property can't be used as collateral for a loan without my approval as the district superintendent, without the approval of the District Board of Church Location and Building, and the approval of a duly called church conference, which is called and officiated by me. Additionally, no property on which a church building or parsonage is located can be mortgaged for any kind of operating expenses. As you are considering disaffiliation, I hope there have been discussions about appropriate means of funding should you choose to disaffiliate, because there are some costs associated with this. If you do decide to vote on disaffiliation, I would just ask you to be very mindful that in any situation where you do take a vote, there are generally winners and losers. Taking a vote can be very divisive and harmful to a church. People who have lived and worshiped together, been in ministry alongside each other for many years, knowing during all that time that perhaps you have a little bit different view or opinion, suddenly those that you've been alongside with may feel like they no longer belong or no longer welcome after a vote. So I hope you'll be very mindful of that and caring of one another in that. If you decide to take a vote on disaffiliation, and if that vote exceeds the 2/3 required majority, I just want to say if you are one of the people who vote not to disaffiliate, please know that we want you to remain in the United Methodist Church, and we want to help you find a new place of worship, a place to praise God, and a place to be in ministry together. We have a church, a conference church called The Gathering, with Reverend Roger Parker as the pastor of that church. That's a place you could immediately transfer your membership to United Methodist Church, even while you might be looking for another church within this area. And please know we're also going to continue to be mindful of opportunities to develop and grow new churches, new United Methodist churches. So, and we want everyone to be sure you have a home where you can continue to worship. I think I'll end there, because again, we really want to focus on specific questions that you have. And again, I appreciate Reverend Tish Malloy being here. I so much appreciate her leadership and all that she has done. Trying to go through this process would have been significantly different without her presence and her assistance and guidance. So Tish, thank you for being here today.
Well, good morning, Broken Arrow First. It's great to be with you, and I have to say, I walked in the door and was immediately welcomed here, and everyone who met me smiled and introduced themselves, and I'm just so thankful to be here with you today and appreciate that very much. My role, first of all, let me just introduce myself a little bit more. I am a United Methodist minister, and I have been for over 30 years, and I've served in Oklahoma almost all of those years in local churches as the pastor, and then as the director of volunteers in mission, and then I was asked by Bishop Hayes if I would serve on the cabinet, and served on the cabinet with Bishop Hayes and also with Bishop Nunn for a total of 8 years, when in our discipline, when you get done with your 8th year as a district superintendent, they want you to leave. And so I did. Actually, it's required. And but I was appointed to a new position. Most of the time, a superintendent will go to another church or another ministry. And in Oklahoma, our bishop, Jimmy Nunn, determined that we were going to be going through a time of very serious transition in the United Methodist Church and, of course, in our Oklahoma annual conference. And so we developed a position that we expect to be not long-term, but called the Director of Transitional Ministries. And I work with churches and also with clergy who are in transition in a number of ways. Some ways are things like when there is a new pastor that's coming to a church and a former pastor is leaving. That's a transition for a church. Or if a church is considering a different form of governance and they would like some guidance in that process, that's also a part of my job. But the bulk of my job is to work with churches that are considering disaffiliation from the United Methodist Church, and then also with churches that have voted and met the required 2/3 threshold of a vote of those present, professing members, present and voting for disaffiliation. If that threshold is met, then those churches must complete a number of requirements by our disaffiliation agreement in order to be prepared for their request for disaffiliation to be considered for ratification by the Oklahoma Annual Conference. We are a part of a connectional church, and you send every year your pastors, and also you send a lay member, so a lay person and a clergy person, equal numbers, to the Oklahoma Annual Conference. And so that connection, that annual conference, is the final determining group that votes to ratify, or they are able to vote not to ratify, a request of the church for disaffiliation. In Oklahoma, we have had first 29 churches in October of 2022 that requested ratification and completed all the requirements of disaffiliation, and 29 churches' requests were ratified. The same happened in April of 2023. We had another special called conference for this purpose, and 55 churches requested ratification of their vote to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church and completed all the requirements to do that, and 55 churches were ratified. You may hear that in other conferences that has not occurred, that some churches have been denied their request. That is true. And I'm just telling you what has happened in Oklahoma thus far. We have one more conference to address ratification requests, and that will be October 13th and 14th. The request will be dealt with on October 13th. And so at that time, those decisions would be made by the annual conference. So my job is to assist congregations in this process, and I do work with the leadership in particular so that they can fulfill the requirements, and it's not a mystery. If you're interested in what all of those requirements are, there is a great deal of information, and I know that your leadership has placed a lot of it on your website and connections to okumc.org. And if you just look under transitional ministry, you will find more than you ever wanted to read on this matter. And also, I want to make sure that wherever I go, I always tell you that I work for you. I don't just work in the conference office. I am appointed to serve you and to assist every United Methodist Church in the Oklahoma Annual Conference. And I take that very seriously. So if you do, maybe you are not on the leadership or not involved in all the details of this matter, but if you read something and you think, I would like to ask her about this, and you leave this meeting today and think, well, I lost my chance. No, you did not. I'm available to you and very glad to assist you, any one of you, in any of these matters. Of course, your pastor is as well, and you may want to go to Larry first. But you're also welcome to contact me. Forgot to bring something up. I know that on your website there is material, and you may not be able to see this from where you are, but it's called Do No Harm, Do Good, and Stay in Love with God. And I've been made aware that many of you have already gone through this 4-session educational series that has been developed in Oklahoma for the Oklahoma Annual Conference. It is available on your website. You can go directly to it, or I've got paper copies of the material too, because this is basically a transcript of 4 videos that you can always watch. But if you just like to read the transcripts, there are copies, Larry, in that bag right by you, and Chelsea's ready to help. Just right up front in this front pew. And this is simply information that has been developed by the denominational transition team of the Oklahoma Conference for you. So I think that's where I'm going to stop. I know you may have any questions. We sure want to address them. And Bishop Nunn, I think it's your turn.
Good morning, friends. It's good to see all of you today. I'll bet you're all here just like this on a Sunday morning for worship, aren't you? If you are, say amen. I know most of you are here, and so thank you for your investment of your life in this congregation and for your presence here today. I have been the Bishop of Oklahoma since 2016. I want to say for the last 30 years, it feels like, but it's only been about 7. And a couple of years ago, so I have 3 conferences now I call a 3-point charge. I've had 2 from the beginning, the Oklahoma Conference and Oklahoma Indian Missionary Conference, and then about 2 years ago, I was assigned the Northwest Texas Conference as well. So that's kind of the state of Oklahoma and all of the panhandle of Texas and down to about I-20, if you know that area at all. And that's a lot of geography, and the conferences are all very, very different. The disaffiliation agreements were different because that is set conference to conference on the ruling of the Judicial Council, which is like the Supreme Court of the United Methodist Church. So I've heard some talk that says, well, in one conference it's this way and one conference it's the other way, and that's true. It's not the same way in any of the 3 conferences. So what we try to do, or what I've tried to do in all the time, is have something that's clear and something that is fair, a process that can be followed. I'll acknowledge it's a difficult process to do. And one of my real regrets is that it does divide churches. I mean, it just does. And that's set forth by General Conference legislation that we do the vote, it's 2/3 vote, etc. And so I just want to say to you that as we enter into voting and discerning, to be patient with one another insofar as it's in your power to be, and try not to be condemning of someone who may vote the way that you do not want them to vote. And so be kind and gentle to each other, and make every attempt to, I guess, to keep your emotions kind of in check. Sometimes our emotions just get haywire and we end up making things worse. Don't read that to say, I'm saying vote this way or that way, or don't vote. I'm not saying that at all. It's your decision. But I'm just saying in the process, my prayer would be that as you approach this, it could be prayerful, and it could be something that I just would hate for longtime friends to become enemies. And I've seen that happen a lot across the church. It's been very painful. I am United Methodist. I managed to trace my genealogy back. We had first of my family ancestors were in Savannah, Georgia when John Wesley was there. They likely were not Wesleyan because they probably helped run him out of town. So anyway, it's pretty deeply rooted in my life and soul. And I think that rather than spend a whole lot more time talking and such, I'd rather move to questions, because we don't want to shortchange that process. And so I think the quicker we can respond to those, the better. But thank you for your hospitality today, and it's really a pleasure to be here with you. And as those are coming, we might take a minute and sort them out, and we'll respond as accurately as we can. Some things I may not be able to answer fully, especially if they're personnel things, but I can talk in general ways about it. So thank you for your consideration on the questions that you're submitted, and we will. I don't know that I want to say we'll answer them, and may not answer them satisfactorily to you, but we will respond to them and do our very best to do that. So we've just found having written questions to be a more manageable format in these types of settings. I think they're coming. This isn't the morning offering, I don't think, is it? Do y'all want to take that up? Yeah. While they're coming, I do want to say how nice it is to be in outer space today. We'll call on Captain Kirk or any of the other folks that come in. And I'm kind of a Trekkie fan. We watched, my wife and I both take journeys to outer space periodically. And we probably watched all the Star Trek series at least 2 or 3 times. And most any other, I think there was a cult show called Firefly that we're fans of that too. Anybody else kind of into that? And there have been some other writers that have done that. So when we travel together, we do some Firefly books. So this is really nice. I don't guess the spaceship's stolen like it is in the Firefly. The what?
It's a very friendly ship.
It's a friendly ship. Oh, yeah. That's great. Friendly ship in friendly church. I bet that's it. Well, boy, I got a stack of questions. I better take an offering because I bet if you had offerings this high, we're sort of what our normal practice is we just sort those on who might be the best person to respond. And we'll get that here in just a second. Y'all got a sense?
Yeah, we can start. Okay. We need to bring the mic over, I think.
Okay. All right.
Should we swing this one?
It should pick everybody up, I think.
Okay, like this?
I think Ross, is that the best? Yeah.
Well, that's an outer space mic, too.
That's pretty fancy. Okay, we got a couple for the bishop.
I'll answer one here that says, we requested this meeting in January. Why is the Oklahoma Conference making it more difficult to go through the disaffiliation process rather than being encouraging by doing everything possible to make it easier? And I do appreciate your patience. I know you had asked for this. We did have some informational church conferences earlier in the year, and actually I had touched base, and you really were at the point in the process for the ones that we had in the early part of the year, which I appreciate that you were continuing in discernment, and so we've had to kind of schedule them at different time frames, and so we had some in January, and we weren't quite ready for that time frame. So July was really the next time frame set up for informational church conferences. Again, when you consider that we had a special call church conference or annual conference in April, we had a regular annual conference in May, and so July was really the time frame, and you're the very first slide. I promised Larry that early on, that you would be the very first gathering, and I do appreciate your understanding, since I know you're about ready to do vacation Bible school. But that's how we got to this particular point in time. While they're sorting through some more, I'll ask, there's one addressed to me of why is it important to me that we stay in the United Methodist Church. I will say I'm a lifelong United Methodist. Was baptized in a United Methodist Church in Bixby, and actually back in this area is home to me. I believe very much in what I've been influenced throughout my life with so many people within the United Methodist Church. I believe in our doctrines. I think we have a very special means of grace and a basis of grace to offer people that I believe is really important in our ministry and sharing God's Word. I hold those true. I believe in what I said and agreed to do in my ordination vows. And I just truly believe we have a lot to offer as a United Methodist Church, and I want to see that continue, not just in this area, but in Oklahoma. Anybody else have a couple? We'll continue to sort through. I think they said it would still pick you up.
Okay.
If it's not right.
Okay. Can everyone hear me all right? I see a lot of nods and a couple of these. That's good. Connie, this is based on your talk, but I think I can answer it. Based on Connie Gibson's talk, number one, if someone votes against disaffiliation and the church votes to disaffiliate, why does the no voter need to find a new church? We welcome all people here. The no voter does not have to find a new church. Many people we have seen who have determined they wish to remain United Methodist and their church disaffiliates from the United Methodist Church do determine that they wish to join a United Methodist Church. And I believe I can say that Connie meant that if you determine you want to remain United Methodist and your church does disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church, we want to assist you and we will. And there are opportunities. That was, I think, the intention. Most churches, by the way, have people who have differences of opinion about a lot of things. Can I get even one witness? Right. So, you know, a person may not, may love a church, love being a part of a church that disaffiliates or that remains United Methodist and disagree on some matters, and in particular on homosexuality, which is the question of this disaffiliation process. So, again, it's only if someone is in a church that disaffiliates and determines they want to remain United Methodist. That was the point. Is it possible to have another annual conference after October to serve more churches who are in the discernment process? Why or why not? The paragraph 2553, upon which all of this process is based, states that we must have the entire process of disaffiliation completed by December 31st of 2023. So it is and if you look on the website, there's a checklist and a timeline there, and there's a lot of detail about how to complete this process. In Oklahoma, we determined that we would need to have the conference vote in October so that people could be done before the deadline. You know, we get into November and people are, you know, off with families and Thanksgiving and then Advent, and so that's why that was determined. I would say that many conferences are completely done with this process. Why? Because their bishops did not hold special conferences for this purpose. Many bishops determined that the conference meets annually, and if you get it done by the annual conference date in 2023, that's the opportunity, and there are no other opportunities. Our bishop determined that we would try to be as fair as possible and to make this process as open as possible to churches considering this, and so he determined that we would have 3 special conferences rather than just our regular annual conference for this purpose. And the October conference is the 3rd in that row. Why are conferences operating differently if we all have the same book of discipline? This may be referring to what Bishop Nunn said about the differences in the disaffiliation agreements. Paragraph 2553 requires that the Board of Trustees, the Conference Board of Trustees in each annual conference, develop its own disaffiliation agreement. And in Oklahoma, and they also provided that the general finance
General Counsel.
General Counsel. We have all kinds of letters, and then I don't know what I'm saying. The General Counsel on Finance and Administration for the entire United Methodist Church create the first document, a guide, by which all conferences would go by. 2553 also provides the opportunity for conferences, boards of trustees, to add requirements to the disaffiliation of churches, but not to take away from the requirements of paragraph 2553. So you may hear that in other conferences, some conferences are required to pay the required amount in paragraph 2553 plus a percentage of the market value of their property. In Oklahoma, our trustees have not determined to do that. And so we have a different disaffiliation agreement than those conferences that have determined to add that kind of requirement. So again, it's required by paragraph 2553 that we have our own disaffiliation agreement, but it has to be in accordance with that paragraph. You want me to go on?
Peter, you're on a good run.
Why would you want to force a church to stay in the denomination when a great majority of its members wish to leave the denomination? I would not wish to do that. Maybe this person is asking why the conference, since we're representing the conference, so I don't mean to be snarky. I really didn't. I was like, why would the conference wish to do that? So far, Oklahoma Annual Conference has not wished to do that. So that's my answer.
The 2/3 vote is disciplinary as well.
Yes. Why should I join the church before disaffiliation? Would it be better to wait until after disaffiliation? If you have been urged to join the church before disaffiliation, it's a guess, but it could be so that you would have the right to vote on this matter. If you are a visitor considering joining the church but wanting to know, are we going to remain United Methodist or are we going to leave the United Methodist Church? And if you wish to be one or the other, it might be better to wait until you know what the church has determined. But that's what I can imagine. Why are we disaffiliating? Why don't we force the dissidents to move out and we keep united? Why did we all jump ship? And then in parentheses, you can answer succinctly. I can't. I don't know. That's an internal matter to this church, and I don't know the answer. You've mentioned Wesley's 3 rules today. This person is referring to do no harm, do good, and stay in love with God. Wesley's 3 general rules, which we are very much trying to follow in the Oklahoma Annual Conference. With the first rule being do no harm, but we've seen harm being done in our conference, from the state of our leadership camps to OCU professors and elders like Professor Davies writing a heretical article on Easter when he denied the passion story of Christ. Why would we stay when nothing is being done? So, regarding doing harm and the state of our leadership camps, I am not sure what this individual is referring to. many people participate in these camps and are greatly blessed by them. So I'm not sure about that. I am well aware of an OCU professor, Dr. Mark Davies. I am not well aware of OCU professors, plural, and elders, plural. So I will just speak to what I am aware of. Dr. Davies, and this person says, heretical article on Easter when he denied the passion story of Christ. The article this person is referring to is a blog, and you can, and I hope you will, read it yourselves and not just be told about it. And it's titled Hope for Regeneration. And Dr. Davies is a professor of ethics and religion, and as such, he understands there to be large spans of ideas about many things. This particular blog, which I have read in detail, and I have spoken very directly to Dr. Davies to ask him about this. It was a sermon that he gave at a Unitarian church. Dr. Davies' family is Unitarian, and sometimes he gets invited to preach in that denomination. He gave that on an Easter Sunday. He understood himself to be participating in academic freedom, where a variety of ideas could be presented. And he never, as far as I can understand, and I have the article right here, I have read it many times just to make sure I understood, because he's a very bright person, and sometimes it takes me a little while. But in the article, he never says that people should not believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ. What he says is that there are many ways to believe in the resurrection. And so that may not be satisfactory, but that is my response regarding Dr. Davies. And regarding nothing being done, I do not know that to be the truth, but it might be. What I do is I go to the source. I heard there was a problem, and I said, Dr. Davies, may I have a consult with you and talk with you? And that's what I did.
I've got a few things on that same morning.
Okay, yeah.
We might just take that all together. And I think I'm just going to, rather than, I've got 4 questions that are all related around this. And I'm not going to read each question, I don't think, because the gist of the matter is before us. And as to complaint, one of the questions asks, why has a complaint not been filed? My role is not to file complaints, it's to receive complaints. And so any clergy or layperson who is a United Methodist may follow the complaint process as outlined for pastors in paragraph 362. And then there are fair process rules in 361.2 of the Book of Discipline. And those are the things that I administer. So when I receive complaints, I do administer those complaints, but I've not received a complaint against him. A complaint is defined as a signed written statement that is sent to me. And so I've not received one of those. I don't read Dr. Davies' blogs. And so I've glanced at this one, but I've not spent very much time on it because I've not had the time to spend on it. Personally, I disagree with the way it was written, but then I've also been I've been in conversations with people who are obviously not Christians, and I've not found the best way to start a conversation about Jesus Christ is to say, well, you don't believe in this or that, therefore you're going to hell. I've just not found that to be an effective evangelistic tool. And so there may be other ways to open conversation with people. And just remind us on the university campus. And this is without looking at merits of the case, so this is a general statement. They're in a diverse society, such as the university setting. People today are not coming, students are not coming with a faith-based background. The number of United Methodists at OCU is small. I'm also on the board of trustees at McMurray University, a Methodist institution in Abilene. And it's even smaller there as far as Methodists. So our private Christian colleges are increasingly secularized places, both from the standpoint of the students who are coming and their perspectives. And so the language you use to try to reach people and talk to people about their faith in Christ is sometimes different than what we would hear in a local church. Again, I have not received a complaint on the matter. If I receive one, then I can assure you that I will be in great deliberation and look at this in a very careful manner. So I think that's probably what I could say about that. Those are all. I mean, just here's one that really I think is addressed to me, so I'm going to just read it and respond to it for me. Bishop Nunn, you've expressed multiple times that you hold Orthodox conservative beliefs. How can you continue to advocate for the UMC when we've seen clear signs that it's headed in an unorthodox direction? If all the Orthodox people leave the United Methodist Church, it will be unorthodox. If the people who, and I'm not sure Orthodox is a good term anymore. Every term it seems like we try to conjure up to explain our faith somehow gets politicized. I will say, for some of these other questions come, I believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I believe in Holy Scriptures. I've got faith in Christ. The question of ordination, are you going on to perfection? Well, what is perfection? Perfection is intent. I'm certainly attempting to do that. Do I expect to be made perfect in love in this life? And it's not perfect in everything. It's perfect in love, which points to intentions. Yes. Are you striving after it? Yes. Are you resolved to devote yourself wholly to God and His Word? Yes. Do I know the general rules of the church? Yes. Will I keep them? Yes. Do you study the doctrines of the United Methodist Church? Yes, more than I ever wanted to. After full examination, do you believe that our doctrines are in harmony with the Scriptures? Yes. Will you preach and maintain them? Yes. Have you studied our form of church discipline and polity? Yes, far more than I ever wanted to. Do you approve of our church government and polity? Most of it. Will you keep it? Yes. And if I said most of it, I'd probably flunk my ordination if I were being ordained again. Will you diligently instruct children in every place? Yes. Will you visit house to house? Yes. I don't do that much anymore as a bishop. You be one of those two. Although I was at camp the other day. Will you recommend fasting and abstinence? Well, by precept and example, yes. Do you determine to deploy all your time in the Word of God? Yes. Are you in debt so as to embarrass you in your work? No. Will you be diligent? And then that goes on. Those are the questions asked of every single ordinand. And I ask them of every person I've ordained. And they either answer yes or they're not ordained. I'm going to read out of paragraph 121 because this speaks for the denomination. And this speaks for me as well, actually. The United Methodist Church affirms, this is paragraph 121, Book of Discipline. The United Methodist affirms that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, the Savior of the world, and the Lord of all. As we make disciples, we respect persons of all religious faiths, and we defend religious freedom from for all persons. Jesus' words in Matthew 28 and 22, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and go into all the world, make disciples. Those are our base scriptures, if you will, basic scriptures. Our faith is fully embodied in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So if I leave the United Methodist Church, I believe that I leave the United Methodist Church, there's one less person that believes that. So that's why I'm staying. I mean, that's just my thing. That's why I'm staying. So that asks about my personal opinion, and there you got it. You want to stay on some more bishop things? Since we're all on a bishop tangent here, let's get that on the website. Oh, thank you very much. All right. What have I and other bishops done about you and Bishop Joseph Sprague, who sits on the council of bishops and blatantly denies the resurrection of Jesus and virgin birth? Bishop Sprague has not been to a council since I've been on, since 2016. I've never met him, and I really don't know him, and I vehemently disagree with him. I understand there are two bishops that are in gay relationships, gay quotes. How is this allowed? It's done in another jurisdiction, and our polity is set up such that one jurisdiction, the South Central jurisdiction is what we're in, does not have, well, bishops are elected from their jurisdictions. So I've been a member of the South Central jurisdiction, serving in Northwest Texas all those years. Oklahoma's in the South Central jurisdiction. One jurisdiction cannot influence the elections of another jurisdiction. I disagree with those elections personally. I think it was the wrong thing with the board of ordained ministries long ago because it violated the book of discipline. That's my opinion, and that's what I've shared. Do I believe the United Methodist candidate for ordination, self-proclaimed drag queen evangelist, Miss Penny Cost, should be ordained or should be punished after stating that God is nothing but a drag queen with a microphone? Oh my God. I'm just going to tell you, this person, if they were a candidate in the Oklahoma conference, would not have my support, does not have my support. I know the bishop in that area, and I've had a conversation with that bishop about this matter. The bishop is opposed to that. There is a district committee on ministry a district committee on ministry that certifies candidates, and that happens to be an activist group, and evidently let the candidacy go forward. I'm just opposed to that, and I think that most of the time I use language that conveys actual equality as opposed to some of this stuff. Do I agree with the statement from our former bishop, Bishop Hayes, when he stated currently there are jurisdictions, conferences, and even bishops who blatantly and openly reject and defy the constitution of our denomination? I'm not sure about the Constitution, what that's talking about exactly. That's more of a policy. Our discipline, okay. Maybe it is discipline. I do know in the Constitution, paragraph 17, I believe it is, states that the General Conference does not have power to change our doctrine. So I'm standing on that Article 1, restrictive rules, the General Conference, this is paragraph 17, the General Conference shall not revoke, alter, or change our articles of religion or establish any new standards or rules of doctrine contrary to our present existing and established standards not saying I don't know the disagreement with. I don't try to pick fights with people, but I have disagreements with that. Bishop Hayes did, by the way, withdraw from the United Methodist Church, and so he's not a bishop. He's not a retired bishop in our denomination anymore. Do you think that if bishops simply follow the Book of Discipline, we would not be facing disaffiliation? In matters of human sexuality, I agree with this, but in matters of the society as a whole, and the church in many quarters wanting to move away from connectionalism, which is that we are all connected, and move to congregationalism, which means we own our own property and we hire and fire our own pastors. I think that dynamic would be pushing us toward some division, and if it weren't human sexuality, it would be something else. Are there provisions going forward to hold bishops accountable if they don't follow the Book of Discipline? Paragraph 413 covers the charges against the bishop. That paragraph said, without a process, if you will, for a long time, about a year and a half ago, I went on the executive committee and began raising this issue that we had no process, that nobody's being held accountable. The Book of Discipline says that. And so I was placed on a task force to develop guidelines under paragraph 413, whereby bishops who have complaints filed against them, it will follow this procedure to adjudicate those complaints. And so that's what I've done about it, is to try to get the council off of what I consider high-centered, because it lacks policy, to develop a policy that is fair and that can provide a hearing and address some of these things that were not just ignored. By the way, one complaint was dismissed against the bishop for, I forgot what the matter was, but it was dismissed. I did not dismiss it, but it was dismissed because the complaint is not confidential, and the complainant had gone online and asked people to sign a national petition. And so if you want to file complaints with me, you can't go online, ask everybody to just a written complaint. It's a single letter. It's not a whole, and it's not a whole thing like that. So that's just a technicality that some have utilized to avoid, some have utilized to adjudicate or not adjudicate complaints. Is it true that some bishops have stated that they do not care what the Book of Discipline says, they will do what they want? I've not had anybody say that to me. When I look at reports of what some events have occurred, I wonder if that might not be true sometime. But I also wonder if those same bishops might look at me and say, well, I'm not doing something else either. So that's a little subjective. If a bishop does not follow the Book of Discipline, why are they allowed to stay in the MC? I think I answered that on the 413 process. How about the teachings of Bishop Oliveto? We know she is openly married to another woman against the Book of Discipline. So, should not have been at ministry level. Bishop was saying, don't agree. And then her teaching, her printed teachings, I've not read any of her work. Jesus is anti-feminine and not worshiping him as an idol or as the Son of God. Also, that Paul should not have driven out demons, specifically the woman was better off with him. Okay, I've not read her work, and I don't know the answer to that. I think I've commented already that a person in the same gender relationship is currently in violation of my understanding of the Book of Discipline. That's enough for me. Can y'all take a break from me and turn that to somebody else?
what happens at annual conference after a church if they vote with a 2/3 majority to disaffiliate. And then if they have completed the requirements of the disaffiliation agreement, then that goes for consideration by the annual conference. It takes a simple majority vote by the annual conference to ratify that. So it is a decision based upon how the elected members to annual conference and the clergy members of annual conference would vote on that. I'm not sure if there's, teach me, talk more about the process.
Well, there's another question very similar that asks what reason, you know, if a church goes through the process and completes the requirements, what reason would there be for the conference to vote against the request? And you know, as I've stated, in Oklahoma, we have not had that experience. I've not experienced anyone having reasons to not ratify in our conference. In other conferences, I'm not aware of the reasons. I mean, I've read things, and you could read the very same things I have about other conferences, but in Oklahoma, that has not happened. You have another? At the April conference, that would be April 2023, when during the liturgy we were celebrating the breaking of the glass, reparations, rioting, etc. The question is, why do we do that? I don't recall it, and I mean, I don't deny this person put this in quotes. And I don't think anyone at this table was a part of creating or determining liturgy at that conference. So I'm sorry, I'm unable. I don't think they're able to answer that.
I'll just comment.
Okay.
I do know that came from the general agency that we've asked to help us, but we're not asking that group to help us anymore. Go back to the ordination. I've got 3 here, and I'll pass it back to you. I'm not talking this long this time. Does the ordination process allow for the ordination of clergy that don't believe in biblical truths, and then one specifically on the resurrection of Jesus, and you know, on the resurrection? To my knowledge, that is not happening in Oklahoma. The boards of ministry actually control who is ordained by vote, and then the bishop is obligated to ordain those persons on the recommendation of the board. If I learn that somebody's out of compliance with book of discipline, or if they don't believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, I'm not going to ordain them. So, and then I'll just face whatever consequences there are from that decision. I'll be subject to whatever, but I'm not doing that.
There's a couple of them that are a little bit related. Where in Scripture does it mention that gay marriage is okay with God? I'm not against gays, attending our church, but need clarification on gay marriage in accordance to the Scriptures. Again, there are some Scriptures that are often referenced relative to gay marriage, and there are different views on and interpretations of some of those Scriptures. Again, for purposes related to disaffiliation, we are focusing on what the Book of Discipline says around that, which you know, we are not allowed to have same-gender marriages in the United Methodist churches, and our pastors are not to perform those same-gender marriages. And so that's the guidance that we are following within the Oklahoma Annual Conference around that. And I have another one that is, it's a long question. I'm not going to read all of it. I do want to acknowledge it. It quotes some Scriptures. Question-wise, it says, why do you believe Christ was
looking more to, are we measuring our beliefs and lives more by the standards of something else instead of scriptures? Are we a self-seeking church? And again, I believe in the things that the question says, whether you don't believe that. I believe Christ was born of a virgin, crucified, and we talked a little bit. I think we all do up here. And that is still the basis of our doctrine within the United Methodist Church.
Here's a question. Would I say that OK Conference, Oklahoma Conference, is a conservative conference? Why or why not? There are people that are conservative. There are people that are not conservative. I've been here 7 years, and my opinion on that has shifted. I think we're a mixed conference as far as that goes, of perspectives, and that's true of both lay and clergy. For me, I think we would rather not be conservative or liberal or middle of the road or anything. I'd rather just follow Jesus and let that be good enough. So if our conference gets on that and we focus on the mission that Jesus gave us to do, which is to make disciples of all people, that's kind of what I'd rather see us happen. Political terms like conservative, liberal, or progressive, or whatever, they change all the time. All that stuff to me just distracts from the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we can even talk about debate the resurrection, but if we're just sitting and debating that and judging one another, I don't know that we're actually following Jesus. So I'd rather the annual conference follow Jesus and not really worry that much about political labels.
I'm just going to comment on that same page with questions, just to acknowledge there was a question there about how are we adjusting the conference apportionments in our budget, and we didn't read that one, but I think I did address that in my remarks.
I've got several budgeted call conference. I think I'll just move to those right away. Why did the conference go 2 years without the audit when all local churches were required to have yearly audits? I'm just going to be really frank with you. The annual conference, when I got here, it took me a couple of years to figure out what was going on. I did not believe that our books were kept according to GAAP. We did have some changes in personnel. We had a couple of bad hires of persons who worked under the treasurer, changed the computer system. One of those things in the old system, a former employee, no, I can't talk about that. We had some things that went into the computer that created real problems for audits. So it took us 2 years to clean that up. Thankfully, there was no money missing, but when what's Randy's last name? Randy Compton. Randy Compton came into our office. I asked him to come on an interim basis and work through our books, and he did that. All our audits since then have been clean according to GAAP, except that we don't record our properties. Our auditor said it's probably not worth going back and finding the original cost of properties, doing all the depreciation and all of that stuff, so we have that notation. Our cash flow has been strong ever since. So, yeah, we have problems. But sometimes with audits, sometimes with financial stuff, when it's not done correctly, there are going to be problems until you get it fixed. Joe Holt is our current treasurer. He worked with Randy Compton in a firm together, and Joe is doing outstanding work. All of our reports are there. Money's there, and we've been very careful to watch that. And it is according to GAAP. We watch cash flow, and so I think all During the Oklahoma Annual Conference I attended in October 2022, there was a presentation of the 23 conference budget. One line item of $15 million was listed under other. During the conference, no one would answer questions regarding where that money came from or where it was going to be used for. Today, when I answered the question, I wished I would have known it ahead of time because I can't answer it off the top of my head. I believe that it lumped together several items and we moved to grouping some items together, but I probably should. Do either one of y'all remember that? I don't remember questions either. Yeah, we might could. Yeah, take a picture of that question. These are not named, and I'm not asking you to identify yourself. But if you'd let your pastor know that you've got that question, Larry, would it be okay if we just send the response to you? Sure. Okay, we'll do that. It'll be next week. I don't think he'll work on it today or tomorrow. Another one here is annual budget. I think I covered, an audit. By the way, we did not change auditors either during this process, so we didn't just end a relationship with the one we had to find somebody that rubber stamped what we did. We kept the same auditor. Can you tell us why no questions were allowed concerning the conference 2023 budget? I thought we were allowed for questions. There was a group that was arguing that things are not transparent. Oh, it was around, it was not about the budget, it was around some reserve funds up there. So, do you remember that?
I don't remember exactly what was.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember ruling something out of order. I'd have to go back and look at the transcript on that. Yeah, that we'll have to respond to that later. I just hate to respond and not be accurate. Same question. Yeah, almost. Different writing. Yeah, that's great. Okay, here's another one. It's the same question. Okay. Let's see. I think this is on the audit, annual audit. For years, the last audit listed deficiencies. Yeah, those have been addressed. Our audits are on the conference website. They're public. So I'd invite you, if you've got audit concerns, to look at those. And Joe Holt is our treasurer who can answer other things around that. Yeah, we'll be glad to get Larry to give them to you. Okay, I attended both the May conferences and want to know my question about the budget. Okay, that's a sentence. Yeah, same question. That one there. Okay, here's one. The UMC has cited the Book of Discipline even today as our rules as a denomination. You've even, I guess this is me, you've even stripped disaffiliating pastors of their ordination. Why have you not also acted or taken action against clergy that are leading LGBTQ ministries and encouraging the behavior in their churches? Okay. Disaffiliation actually is twofold. Pastors do not disaffiliate, they withdraw. And that's governed under paragraph 360 of the Book of Discipline. And that does require that, as I've interpreted it, and I'm not alone in that interpretation, that a clergy person submit their credentials to the conference secretary, who marks them as withdrawal from United Methodist Church, and if the person wants those back, they can have them back. I've not taken any action against someone which would require filing charges. Well, I did file charges against people who refused to do that. So if they refused to do that, then they did withdraw under a separate paragraph, which is considered a complaint. People just need to follow the rules on that, and they withdraw themselves. To the second part of that question, it leads to another whole bunch of questions I've got here. I think I'll just go right into the statement was that pastors in the LGBT are doing issues such as saying, well, this is another question, but it's the same thing. I think this is a little more pointed. Why is Oklahoma Conference pastors who perform same-sex weddings not face a trial and suspension for a year without pay, as required by paragraph 2711 of our Book of Discipline? I've had 3 complaints on pastors, and with every complaint, the first requirement I have is to seek to find what's called a just resolution. Just resolution is achieved when all the parties believe that they can settle for that. I've chosen to do just resolutions instead of going to trial, and so that a just resolution takes this penalty, which is mandatory after a trial, off the table. It's still an option. I've chosen not to do that because it would probably cost about $50,000 per trial. And frankly, I think that's a waste of money. So the just resolution, without going into details, I have a principle that I'm following. And that is that they are basically penalized a mandatory monetary contribution to the Clergy Crisis Fund. And then they are suspended as well for a period of time. It is less than 1 year. So that's how I've adjudicated those. I've already answered that. There's 3 weddings that have been done. I really don't want to comment on the persons or the specifics because it's a personnel matter, but I'm just giving you my general approach to this. I'm also looking at a general approach to that because I do expect some disaffiliations of churches and withdrawal from clergy. Not all of these persons that have been complained against, but some. So, and that's a first offense, by the way. Why are pastors not following and upholding Book of Discipline? Okay, what am I doing about it? I think if in terms of same-gender stuff, I think I just answered that. Is there anything else on same-gender stuff? Or do you want to take that?
This is all related, the questions are why are the leaders of the church not obeying or enforcing the laws of the church? Book of Discipline. Why did leadership allow staff to go away from our Book of Discipline? Why would we believe that moving forward, leadership would be able to lead us when currently we don't follow our own rules? The future will be holding staff accountable, and how will things change to hold staff accountable? What discipline will be handed out if they choose to not follow our Book of Discipline?
Staff.
Well, it doesn't really clarify the staff or leadership or what aspect is not being followed. I think some of it falls generally within what you generally described, but I don't have the specifics on staff or leadership.
On the staff, I'm not really aware of what this is referring to. So I need some follow-up. Somebody like to put that in writing to me, that's fine. Send me a letter or email. And j9@okumc.org. j9@okumc.org if you want. If you've got a specific thing on that, I'll be happy to take that.
Why don't you take, I need to look here.
I do have a few, and I pulled up that budget in question to try to find a category other of $15 million. And it's not printed on that budget, so there may be some other reference that I'm not seeing, but Larry, you may have access to this, but I can also send you the budget so that people could look at it, that we voted on at that conference. And yes. And I didn't find another category, but I was just scrolling. I'm going to take, there's a couple here, Bishop, I'll be glad to take these on the concerns about Oklahoma City First United Methodist Church and Oklahoma City Church of the Servant. Okay. So the questions are, and there's, these are very similar. I'll read, why is the Oklahoma Conference fighting so hard to keep some churches like First Church in Oklahoma City and Church of the Servant from voting? Why not be gracious and support churches to do what the congregation wants? And the other question is I think it's the same. These are two different situations, the disaffiliation agreement of the Oklahoma Conference has within it as the first conditions precedent, okay? So the conditions of going through this disaffiliation agreement, that the district superintendent may call for it's really an evaluation of a church's vitality. The district superintendent of the Heartland District, where the Oklahoma City First Church is, did call for that. Now, if that is called for in the disaffiliation process, it can be completed, and then the church leadership has three choices. They can immediately continue with the disaffiliation process, go through everything, vote, and complete that. That is within the realm of possibility or likelihood, I think, for First Church. The second is that a church can determine that they will close as a United Methodist Church and go through that process. And the third is that they could remain United Methodist. And the conversation on church vitality, which is what that evaluation is, helps a church to see what are some things we can do to grow and to expand our witness for Jesus Christ. First Church has been required to do that. Before the completion of that process, they entered into a lawsuit with the Oklahoma Annual Conference and requested a restraining order on our conference so that we could not complete any process with them. So right now we are in a lawsuit, we are under a restraining order, and we cannot complete. It's not the conference that's unwilling. We are ready and willing to complete that process with First United Methodist Church of Oklahoma City. But because we are in this lawsuit, we are unable to do that at this time. And then regarding Church of the Servant, Church of the Servant has voted, and the vote that they took on September 11th of 2022 did not meet the 2/3 required threshold to be considered for disaffiliation by the United Methodist Church. And in fact, on that day, they voted and they did not meet the threshold, and then on that day requested reconsideration of that vote and voted a second time, which is allowed by our conference, not every conference, and is not required to be allowed by paragraph 2553. It's a part of our disaffiliation agreement. When they voted the second time, they did not meet the 2/3 threshold required by paragraph 2553. So they have actually voted 2 times. In our disaffiliation agreement, there is a requirement that churches cannot vote within 1 year, 12 months, again, without consultation with and the approval of the district superintendent. Church of the Servant indicated to conference leaders, including our bishop, for many, many, many months, their leaders said, we're not going to continue this process. And then in early June of this year, they did come to request that they have a second vote. The district superintendent entered into the consultation process with the leadership of Church of the Servant and was in the midst of that process when on July 3rd in the afternoon, they filed a suit against the Oklahoma Annual Conference. So at this point, I would say that the Oklahoma Conference was in process with both of those churches so that their considerations could be addressed. And then they filed lawsuits. And so now we're in that process, and hopefully that will be cleared up as soon as possible. The vote has options of yes, no, and abstain. And there's two of these kinds of questions. Basically, the question is, how are our abstentions counted? And this can be very upsetting to people because paragraph 2553 specifically states professing members present and voting, not voting yes or no. So the whole number of the professing members that are voting are counted. 2/3 of that whole number must vote in support of disaffiliation for that church's request to be considered. So, in effect, because of that, abstentions are counted as no votes.
If you were up here close, you might have heard my reminder just went off that it is 10:30. That's really good timing that we answered all the questions.
Well, I think I've remarked enough today, so I'm just going to say thank you for coming and for being here, for your love for the church and for this congregation.